Morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We'll start in about 30 seconds, but before we do, I just want to draw your attention to either the email that you would have received from me about an hour ago or the link that I've just put in the chat box. That link will take you directly to the download page for the workbook that goes along with this webinar on resilience, leading through the 6-month wall. So if you haven't already got that from the email, go to our website now and download it from there. It's an interactive workbook, so the PDF should be editable for you. Just make sure you save it when you're finished. It's something that you can use now and going forward beyond the webinar. So having said that, I think as you're doing that, we'll start. So we've hit 11 o'clock and we're going to be talking a little bit about things that you can control. And one thing you can control in life is when we start webinars. So here we go. So I'm Joe Nagel, Innovation Director at the Innovation Beehive, and very shortly I'll be handing over to Mock from the Innovation Beehive, who's going to be taking us through the webinar today. Thank you for joining us to explore leading through the 6-month wall. And as I say, we're going to be working through the different activities that are in the workbook for resilience that we've developed. So before we do that, I'll just talk a little bit about the Innovation Beehive. We are the Innovation Beehive, and we work with clients on innovation projects, culture projects, and leadership projects. And one of the core principles that we operate by is that we use human-centered design or design thinking to solve people-related challenges. And over the last few weeks, we've been working alongside our clients really closely, and we've identified that there's a need, there's this real need to help ourselves and our teams to break through the 6-month wall that we've all seemed to have hit in these challenging times, you know, as the pandemic hasn't calmed down, as it were, and it's actually, we seem to be going through a second wave. So we applied design thinking to the challenge. We talked to our clients to try and understand what was going on in their world. And then we developed this solution for our clients, and we're delighted to be sharing it with you today. And as I just talk a little bit more about the Innovation Beehive, you're going to see some of our clients emerging on the screen here. I spent far too long developing this slide, but you can see we work right across the spectrum of industry and sector, predominantly working with HR leaders, but also working with innovation leaders, senior leadership teams, and as I say, working on a wide variety of projects focused on innovation, culture, and leadership. So I hope you feel that on this webinar today, you're in good hands. And right now, I'm going to hand over to Mock, who's going to talk to us about leading through the 6-month wall. Mock, over to you.
Great, thanks very much. I hope you can all see me. Very nice to have you on the call with us this morning. As Joe said, we're an innovation company and everything we do is based on insight. And talking to a number of clients and people across their organization, they're really starting to feel, gosh, are we here again? We started to hear people say, I am moving right back mentally to where I was in March at the beginning of this pandemic. And so talking to our clients and understanding where they are, and also talking to clients and examining what we've been doing over the last 6 months to take care of our well-being, build up our resilience and make sure we have the energy in our backpacks. We developed the Leading Through the 6-Month Wall booklet that Joe has spoken to you about, and hopefully you've all downloaded now. But on the next slide, really, you'll see where we are. None of us thought we would be where we are now. In all honesty, when lockdown started, we were all working from home. We were getting on with trying to operationalize our business, learn new ways of working. But we all thought that, you know, 6, 8 months, or certainly by the time Christmas came around, we would be far away from the ravages of the pandemic. And we're not. We're seeing lockdowns in Wales. We're seeing tier levels across the country differing in England, with the Northeast in tier 3. We are not, a lot of our clients work in the aviation sector. We're not seeing a massive uplift still of people confident to fly. We've had some changing messages from the government over the last few months about social distancing. Pubs and the retail hospitality sector absolutely being devastated by this. And COVID is very much sort of front and foremost in all of our minds, whether we work in the third sector, whether we work for ourselves, or whether we work for a large corporate. It's something we cannot avoid. It's absolutely front and foremost in all of our minds. And we're doing as much as we can operationally to try and carry on working and trying on delivering the value that we can deliver. But that's taking a toll on us. Many of us are really feeling a bit like this on the next slide, sort of hanging off a bit of a cliff at the moment. We may have used a lot of our resilience over the last 6 months. We may have put some practices in place initially. I know I certainly was doing the Couch to 5K run app, and that may have disappeared a little bit as the weather got a bit darker in the morning, a little bit wetter. But many of us might be feeling a little bit like this, just hanging on, but at the same time, in the back of our minds, knowing that we are just at best in the middle of this. There is more that will confront us, and there is more that we'll need to do. But the question is, how do we actually go about filling our energy packs and putting ourselves in the best possible position to cope with the challenges of COVID that we know will be coming over the next 6 months? So as we stand confronting the wall, which is on the next slide here, if we're standing there, we know the wall is in front of us. We know that there are some challenges that we will need to overcome. And the question is really, and what we hope to help you in this webinar think through, is with the wall in front of you, how do you go through it? How do you go around it? Or how do you go over it? The most important thing is you're not defeated by the wall, and that you find a way that works for you to make sure that you're able to deal with the challenges that are going to come and the other walls that will confront you over the next 6 months. So before we begin this, oh, sorry, Joe, yes?
We check in with people to see how they are feeling today. We've got a poll that we can launch. And I think that'll give us a good barometer of how people are getting on, how people are feeling. And it's also, I think it's also good for all of us to just check in with ourselves, isn't it, every day to just see how we're feeling today. So we're going to launch that poll. You can tick as many of these options as you're feeling right now, because I know some of us can feel optimistic and fearful at the same time, for example. And if there's a word that you're feeling that isn't on the list there, please do feel free to type it into the chat box. And you should be able to see that on your screen now.
Results are coming in. Results are coming in. Interesting. Great. 100% voted. Joe.
So I shall end the poll, and you'll all be able to see the results on the screen. So here we go. So there's some interesting results there. I'm pleased to see no one's ticked fearful. That's good, because I think that's the strongest negative feeling that we've got on that list of options there. And actually, most people have selected determined, which is great. You know, I think we're standing in front of the wall, but you know, the question, how do we go through it? How do we go around it? How do we go over it? Actually holds in itself the answer, and we need to be determined in order to do any of those things. Yeah. Are you seeing anything else on those responses that strikes you, Mark?
I think there's low levels of confidence, absolutely, because we don't know what we don't know. One of the things that we've heard from leaders over the last few months is, how do I give an answer to a question when I don't know the answer? Feeling, you know, that lack of confidence. Whereas up until this point, you know, at the end of the day, if a team member didn't know how to do something, we could probably give them the answer once we'd exhausted all the coaching and support routes. We don't know. We're not confident necessarily at the moment because we don't know what we're going to confront. Absolutely, the you know, feelings of anxiety, and interesting, there 44% of people also saying that they are concerned. Sorry, they are tired. Matched, I'm pleased to say, with 44% optimism. So, you know, I think what's interesting is that you're right when you said how you're feeling today, and it may just be how you're feeling at 11:09 on Thursday, because you can go through the whole gambit of emotions throughout the day and throughout the week. And hopefully we'll put some micro habits and some micro practices in place today, so you'll be more conscious of how you're feeling and then be able to take control of those feelings. So before we actually go into the meat of the habits, I'm going to ask us to just reflect for a moment, just to think a little bit around moving away from whatever we were doing. I was in the office this morning at 8:15, getting out a presentation for a client on a piece of work we're doing for them. My mind has been whirring over the last couple of hours, thinking through to getting ready for this. Lots of noise in our heads. So I'm just going to run a little bit of a grounding exercise for us. I want everyone just to take a moment and just to pause and get ourselves in the right headspace to be able to receive the wisdom from this webinar. So if you want to, close your eyes. You can't be seen. It's totally confidential. But we're just going to do a short breathing activity just to ground ourselves in this moment. So if you get the opportunity, please just close your eyes and notice what is present in your mind. So wherever you're sitting, just really feel yourself in the chair, and the chair has you. There's no striving or straining. Chair is holding you completely at this moment. And now we're going to focus on our breath. So breath is always a great way just to let go and center yourself and be present. So just become aware of yourself breathing and draw in your breath through your nose to the count of 3. Little pause at the top of the breath, and then release the air through your mouth to the count of 5. So breathing in through your nose to the count of 3, and then a soft release of air through the mouth, counting silently to 5. And let's do 4 conscious breaths like that. And as we become aware of our breath, it begins to still us and start to change our state. Just breathe. It's a good way to come out of the churning mind that's present in our bodies. And just allowing ourselves and our awareness to come out of our mind. Leave the mind to whir and do whatever it does quite happily. And then bring your awareness to your face. So feel into your eyes, an inch behind your eyes, and let your eyes relax. Let your forehead relax and your cheeks soften. And scan down your face and let your jaw relax. Let your jaw go. Open your mouth and just let your tongue relax. Be present in your body. Focus on your neck and your shoulders and feel them relax, letting your hands become heavy by your side or in your lap. Breathe into your back. Notice any tight spots, any points of tension, and just breathe into those tight spots and relax. And release the small of your back in your chair. So let your weight drop back into your chair and feel your tummy relax. Now, as you breathe in, opening your diaphragm and really breathing air right down into your lungs. Following that breath through into your lungs and allowing your awareness to drop down like a stone in the ocean. Breathing in, softening, relaxing your body and letting it find its natural state. So nothing is needed from you, just breath. Feel your weight held in the chair. Your face is soft and your feet are grounding and holding you. So gently place your hand on your heart and feel it beating. And feel into the energy in your heart. Feel the rhythm of your heartbeat and your breath, relaxing your body and enjoying the experience of just being present. Now, allow your consciousness to move up your body, breathing softly, traveling up again into your mind, taking that deep breath in on the count of 3, and then out through the mouth on the count of 5. So just take a few moments to be present here with a consciousness of your body, your strength, and your breathing. And we'll hold the silence a little bit longer. And notice what you're feeling now. So the invitation has been just to let go and breathe. No strain. Be present and notice. Now, in your own time, come back into the space and smile. So just a moment there, just to center ourselves, move away from everything we'll be doing before this webinar. That will be there for us when we get back. But now focusing in on how we can take care of ourselves and move through, over, or around the wall. Now, we do a lot of work, as Joe said, with leaders. And over the summer, we published Leadership 4.0, which was all about helping leaders to lead through disruptive times. It identified through talking to leaders who've led through difficult and disruptive times in the past, such as the SARS pandemic or the global crash. We asked them what they do and what they did to make sure they were able to lead their people. You can find more out about that on our website, but it talked about leading in head, having the operations in place, leading in heart, making sure that you're connected in to your purpose and understand what motivates and engages people. Leading in health, taking care of yourself and each other. Leading in habit, being aware of how you behave, how you show up to people, consistency as a leader, and how to have a transparent decision-making process. And leading in history, thinking about what impact you want to have once you've long gone from serving the people that you serve when you're a leader. And that gave our leadership community 5 key practices to undertake that will help them lead their people through the disruptive times. But really, there is a piece around you. What about you? What about you as an individual? Just because you have VP in your job title, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are immune to any of the challenges of COVID or immune to any of the problems that we have. And whilst these 5 practices are great for leading your people, we felt it was important to actually focus in on 2 of them that are very nurturing for you as an individual. And so today we'll be focusing particularly on leading in heart and leading in health to help you create the right micro habits to be able to take care of yourself. So I'm going to take you through some of the activities which you can find within your workbook. The first activity I want us to think about is really exploring what you do. This is an opportunity just to pause from all of the hurly-burly, still the noise for a moment, and really think about what is it that motivates and engages you. Why did you get into the business that you're working in at the moment in the first place? When you're knee-deep in the detail, take a moment to pause and just remember, what was it that engaged, inspired, poked your interest that you decided to go into the industry you're in, the business that you're in, the company you work for, or to do the job that you do? And to do that, we developed an activity that's 3 stages for you to think about why you were initially engaged, what creates what we say at the Innovation Beehive, the duvet chuck, what gets you out of bed in the morning and inspires you to go and show up at your very best. Thinking about why you first engaged with that organization, that job, or that industry. Have a reflection back over what are you most proud of within your career? What have you done that you think has really impacted positively on your team, on your clients, or on the world? And then try and capture what that felt like. What was the emotion? What did it do for you? How are you feeling when you had that moment, when all of your individual values and your sense of personal purpose came together in an activity that you're really, really proud of? How did that feel? And then thirdly, what does this tell you about why you do what you do? Because as we have to go into all of the operational detail and all the challenges of COVID, we can sometimes lose sight of the bigger picture. We can sometimes forget why we got into this in the first place, as we're having to adapt and change and be agile and confront different problems. But grounding ourselves back into why I do what I do, and not just only focusing on what I need to do to get everything done, allows you to reconnect in with what's really important to you. Remind yourself of the positive emotions that you have around the work that you do. And then think around, how can I take these positive emotions and remind myself around why I'm doing what I'm doing? So I invite you after today to take some time to think through that activity, identifying why you got into what you're doing in the first place, what you're most proud of, what that evoked in you as a feeling, then what does that tell you about the work you do? And just by articulating that, you'll tap back in to the original purpose you had way before and will carry on way after COVID. The second activity you'll find in the workbook I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to ask you actually to take a moment to complete it for yourselves during this webinar. This is all about reflecting on what you can personally celebrate, what you have achieved, particularly over the last 6 months. Now, it might seem quite odd to be talking about celebrating and recognizing success when we're in the middle of such an awful pandemic. However, it's important to realize that you have achieved a great deal and to recognize for yourself what you've achieved over the last 6 months. This allows you to tap into your personal successes, to really start to make sense of the journey that you've been on, and also then to create elements of pride, so you feel that you are achieving some success, so you can see how you're moving forward, even through some of the terrible challenges and difficult decisions that we've had to make. The thing to remember is you're still here. However you may be feeling at the moment, whether it's anxious, whether it's fearful, whether it's confident, whether it's determined, whether it's concerned, you're still here. You've done it, you've got through the first 6 months, and you've made impact on people, your team, your families, your community, and even the wider world. So taking a moment to think through the challenges you overcame, how you overcame them, and actually what does that mean for you, is a great way of starting to recognize for yourself how strong you are, how much you've achieved, and that helps you to move out of the day-to-day challenges that you have and say to yourself, I've got this. I know it's difficult. I know there are many problems I'll be experiencing. However, I've come this far. I've overcome so many challenges to date. I've got the skills, the belief, and the capability and the will to confront the challenges that will come towards me over the next 6 months. So I'm going to ask you, if you've downloaded the workbook, that's great. It's interactive. You can fill it in there, or if you just get a bit of paper, if you haven't managed to download it yet, and take a moment to follow these steps with me. So in the activity, it asks you to think about 3 challenges, but I'm just going to ask you for the purpose of this webinar, just to think about 1 challenge that you've had to face since the start of the pandemic. 1 thing you had to do. It might be dealing with a member of staff. It might be changing an operational procedure. It may be something you had to do with a family member. It may be changing the way you work or the way you communicate. 1 challenge that you had to face since the start of this pandemic. 1 challenge that you were successful in completing, that you know you rose to the challenge and you came up with a solution that moved you forward. And then step 2, write down what did you do to successfully achieve this, to rise to that challenge and to overcome it. Don't talk about what you could have done better. We can always do things better. We can always learn from what we've done previously. But what did you actually do? What was the good that you do? What were you successful at? Whether it was about your state of mind, whether it's the way you spoke to people, whether it's about an operational change, whether you took in wider stakeholder context, what did you actually do to make sure that you were able to rise to that challenge and overcome it? And then in step 3, just write down how it felt. The good, how did it feel when you knew that was out there and you'd solved a problem? And if during that solution process you had doubts or you had some uncertainty, how did you overcome them? Did you talk to someone else? Did you speak to a coach? Did you become conscious of the self-talk inside? Did you look to some books or webinars like this to help you with the motivation to be able to overcome that challenge? How did it feel? And how did you manage your doubt and your uncertainty? So I'm going to give you a moment just to write down a challenge that you've overcome. How did you successfully overcome it? What did you do? And then how did it feel? Or how does it feel now? Because maybe you haven't taken the opportunity to pause and reflect. How does it feel now, knowing that you overcame that challenge and you came up with the solution? It may not have been 100%, but it was a solution. You didn't avoid the challenge. There's something you can celebrate, the success that you had. You took the bull by the horns, as my mother would say, and you tried your best to overcome that challenge.
Mark, can I share an example? So
yes, lovely.
I find this particular activity really helpful because it's about looking at challenges and almost reframing them as things to celebrate. So one of the challenges that I've been facing through the entire pandemic is looking at how we're going to sustain the future of the business when we're living through such challenging economic times. And I saw an opportunity to start exploring public sector tenders, which are very, very different to the way that I've gone about working with clients before. You know, it's faceless, it's relationshipless, it's a big form you have to fill in. So that was the challenge that I had to face. And to successfully achieve it, I put myself on a course, which happened over a period of 4 weeks. And I just really, you know, sometimes when you go on courses, you can sort of sit passively and just sort of soak it all in, but not really absorb it. But I knew that was a risk. So I just thought, right, I'm going to do the best I can here and I'm really going to focus. So I took myself away to a room and it was delivered on Teams and, you know, really engaged with the content, really, really worked hard to learn what I could. And then found a tender to go for and went for it and then received a notification saying we've been taken through to the final stage. Now, the thing is, we didn't win that tender, but I'm still celebrating that experience, not because we didn't win the tender, but because we got through to the final stage. So all the hard work that I put into learning paid off. And as a result, I'm confident going forward for future tenders because we didn't win it, but we came close. And coming close in that particular sector is a good thing, especially when you're fairly new to it, because there can be only one winner. And I'm confident that we will win.
That's a great example because actually, you know, it's celebrating the journey that you were on and the micro success you had, even if you didn't get the final prize or the final goal. And actually, at the moment, we might set ourselves goals that we want to achieve, but because of circumstances beyond our control, we don't necessarily achieve the ultimate goal, but we do achieve micro goals and micro accomplishments along the way. I'm just wondering if you learned anything about yourself or about the business through going through that process or through actually identifying it as a micro achievement, even though you didn't win the tender.
Well, for me, this tool helped me to realize that sometimes you don't know what you're going to be celebrating when you start the thing. But when you reflect on it and look back, then you can find the things the moments to celebrate and the experiences to celebrate. So I wouldn't have got to that point without having gone through this tool when we were developing it, as part of the prototyping phase of developing it. So that was a really useful insight for me, that actually, when you look back, you can see the successes that you didn't even see in the moment. You know, you have the terrible disappointment of being told you haven't won, but then look back and say, well, look what I did achieve. And the other thing I learned about myself, thinking about the previous the previous practice that you talked us through, Mark, was that actually I strive to learn. So I look back on every experience I have, everything I do, and I think, well, how could I have done that better? Not asking myself how I could have done it to beat myself up because I didn't do it like that, but actually, how could I have done it better so that I can do it better next time? So it's a learning process as opposed to a regret process. So I can celebrate and bask in the failure almost, because I can take so much learning from it.
And, you know, we know that as we go forward, we'll get better and better, and you'll get better at tenders, and, you know, hopefully we'll win one in the future. Thank you. So does anyone else like to share something that they can celebrate, an achievement that they've had over the last 6 months? If you'd like to pop something in the chat function there. Has anyone had anything reflecting upon over the last 6 months? What are they most proud of? Did you ever think you'd confront these problems? Did you think you'd be able to overcome them in a way that you have? Just taking that moment to think about, what have you done that's been successful, those micro accomplishments, the learning, as Joe said there. Is anyone brave enough to share a celebration or something that they think they are proud of and they've achieved over the last 6 months? Oh, I've had one come in here, which is interesting. We've had someone here say, actually, working with a team to move organizations to remote working. Absolutely. You know, many of us, I know that particular participant works in the HR field. So that was a huge challenge for so many of us when we first started and went into lockdown. We actually often had the tools in our toolkit. We had Team, we had Zooms, we had Slack, all sorts of different things. And certainly we've been exploring the Microsoft Office 360 suite over the last 6 months and making full advantage of stuff we already had and were being paid for. But that challenged both operationally of moving teams to remote working, I imagine, and then also the idea of actually kind of coping with an organization, as you say here, an organization that was mainly anti-working from home. So I bet there was lots of politics you had to navigate there, lots of emotions that you had to navigate, balancing the needs of the people in the organization against some of the views of the senior leadership team. And, you know, working with a team to move organizations to remote working from an organization that was mainly anti-working from home. That's a huge win. It may have felt at times like a drudgery and you were having to go through the wars to do it, but actually it's worth looking back and saying, how did I go about doing that? How did I convince people and how did I support people? So thank you very much for sharing that. So actually, 2 practices.
Sorry, Mark, that particular example puts me in mind of something that's probably quite insightful for this particular activity, for this practice, that you don't need to wait until the end of the project or the end of the journey in order to look back and celebrate. You know, I go hill walking a lot, and I love walking up a hill, and I'm always looking back, because as I go up higher and higher, I can see more and more of the landscape emerging behind me. And I think that, you know, that's a great metaphor for what's happening in terms of the celebrations that we're storing up for ourselves, the treasures of celebration that we're storing up for ourselves, and we can just keep looking back and take energy from it to sort of recharge and help us take the next step.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Now I want to take, apologies, I want to take a moment now to really focus in on you and to ask you to just think about, how are you taking care of yourself? This is about being kind to yourself. I know as leaders, whether you're a line manager or whether you work in the HR field, A lot of what we're having to do at the moment is really understand what's important to our people, meet them where they are, and be flexible to support them through this. But also, just because you have VP or HR manager in your title doesn't mean that you're superhuman. This is about making sure that you acknowledge what's going on for you and you take time out for yourself. It may be that one of your family members is going through a challenge. It may be that a partner is at risk of redundancy. All of those things will be impacting on you. And it's important to take a moment to recognize those and to put some practices in place to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And part of good mental health is about being very open and honest, about really expressing when it's okay not to be okay. It's about having a really genuine, authentic conversation. One of the activities I do, and I learned this in a webinar over the summer, is when I check in with someone and say, hey, how are you? Inevitably, the first answer is, I'm okay. And then you ask again, so how are you? And that tends to elicit a deeper and more authentic answer. And it's signaling it's okay to have a conversation around when I'm not feeling great. And it's okay to accept when someone says, actually, I'm absolutely fine. But part of the practice of good mental health is about being open and honest about our emotions and feeling confident enough to express when we're feeling okay, but when we're not feeling okay. And it's about also recognizing being kind to yourself in that some days you will not have a good day. Some days you'll have a bad day, and everyone does. And when that bad day comes along, acknowledge it. So I sometimes say things like, I'm having a bad day. This afternoon is not going the way I wanted it to go. And actually, by articulating that out loud, somehow the day doesn't own me. The blackness doesn't own me. I'm articulating it, I'm visualizing it, and therefore compartmentalizing it. And I'm far more in control of it rather than it being in control of me. And it's about reminding yourself actually that things are tough and it's a normal response to what's going on in the world. And on those bad days, just really thinking about the tasks that you can do, thinking about the tasks that give you energy, the tasks that you really enjoy, and seeing if you can reshuffle your diary or reshuffle your priority list to make sure you're doing the things that nurture you, that give you energy at work on those days when you're finding things a little tough. One of my tips is to not watch the news, okay? So call a friend that you haven't spoken to in a while. Don't text them, give them a call. I checked in on someone who I haven't heard from in a few months. I've left her a couple of voicemails, haven't heard anything. I was about to send her a text yesterday morning. I thought, you know what? I'm going to call her. And actually, she's been suffering quite a lot over the last 6 months, worried about her mother. She lives on her own. She's been in isolation. She's been seeking some mental health support. And I took the time out, rather than listening to the Today program, which was my temptation, to actually check in on my friends. So not putting yourself in a place where you'll hear trauma, where you'll hear bad news. Taking time out to have a bath, even if it's in the middle of the day, and getting to bed early. I'm somebody who was always, listening to the news at 11, 10 o'clock and then pottering about, tidying up the house. 11:30, quarter to 12, will start going to bed. 9 o'clock now, I'm on my way up the stairs. It might take me an hour and 20 minutes before I actually turn the light off. But I'm just giving myself that space to get rid of the day, to go into a place that relaxes me and make sure I get as much refreshed sleep as I possibly can so I can get up the next day to face the challenge that I'm facing. And also something that I think really helps is when the world is dark, really try proactively just to look for one piece of color. So when you're having that bad day, when you're feeling really overcome with emotion or feeling challenged, I set myself the challenge to seek out a moment of joy, whether it's by having a favorite snack or whether it's taking that time for a bath, whether it's about standing outside in the garden and just looking at the color, something that you can do so that in those moments of darkness, you're actively giving yourself the opportunity to find those moments of joy. This isn't about committing to doing Keep Fit at 6:30 every morning with the personal trainer. This isn't about putting those real challenges on yourself to say, I have to do a couch to 5K app. This is about adopting just little micro habits that allow you to be kind to yourself, that re-energize you so you can cope with the bad days and acknowledge when those bad days come, and give you a few practices to help you deal with them. And you'll see on the next page here in the workbook, there's just a little bit of an activity to start thinking about what can I do to take care of myself, whether it's going to bed early, whether it's moving from a full fat day to Lucozade Zero when you need the energy, whatever it might be, keeping myself hydrated, making sure that I have a glass of water beside me at all times. I was talking to the chair of a board that I'm on. I'm a trustee for a charity, and he really struggles to keep hydrated. And so his wife has bought him a water bottle that flashes every 25 minutes. And that's just a little micro habit that reminds him to take a drink. So what those little things that you can do, those little micro practices about making sure you step outside. My garden is beginning to put itself to bed for winter, but I still have some sweet peas in the left-hand side of the garden. And I even said this morning, I really hope those sweet peas last until the 1st of November. And I will then celebrate that. I grew them from seed. I planted them with my hand in April. They've been with me all through the summer and autumn. And I feel if I get to the 1st of November, there's just a few sweet peas in the garden. It's something for me to enjoy and celebrate. And then it's also important just to stop and pause and think about, what am I doing to stop myself from taking care? So one of our colleagues was talking about how she has the news on, even at night in her bedroom. Are you doing things that bring trauma and bad news or don't nourish you? Are there things that you can root out? And just by listing them and being acknowledging of them, you might be able to take those out, those energy zappers from your life. And Joe, we've had a couple of comments have come in, which is lovely. We've had someone talk about, I'm taking part in Beethoven's Ode to Joy in a choir and finding moments of joy. That's fantastic. That's lovely. And that sense of when we're not connected and can't be physically together, often we can find ways to build community online there. And Paolo, thank you. You've made a comment there about our activity. That's great. So thank you. I encourage you after today to take some time really to say, what little things can I do to take care of myself, particularly if you're in a family or a leadership role. So often you're being drawn to take care of other people. You can't take care of others unless you take care of yourself.
Well, can I just chip in on this?
Yeah.
So we've got a poll that we're going to share in a second about whether people already have those practices. In fact, I'll launch that now, and as you're answering it, I'll say what I was thinking in response to what Mark has said. So one of the things that I love about this tool is it's not prescriptive. So we're not saying, oh, you must do 15 minutes of well-being every day, or of mindfulness every day, or, you must walk 5 miles every day or 10,000 steps. We're saying, find something that works for you. So for me, I have been, I've started meditating for 20 minutes in the morning, just after I get up, and 20 minutes before I go to bed. And it is the last thing I do before I go to bed. I used to listen to podcasts. I don't anymore. 20 minutes of meditating helps me relax, and then I drift off straight to sleep, and it's amazing. I'm also planning on condensing my week into 4.5 days so that I can go for a hike in the middle of winter, but I can go for a hike on a Friday afternoon and on a Saturday. But it's about finding what works for you and what works for you now. I was chatting to someone yesterday who was saying, would you recommend meditation for me? And I was like, well, for you, I'm not sure, because he's so buzzy in his head. But if you are going to try it like this. Whereas so much of the stuff that you see online about mindfulness and meditation and well-being seems to prescribe a sort of fixed process that has worked for this person. But when you think about cognitive diversity, physical diversity, not everything is going to work for everybody. So the great thing about listing these things is you go off, you find some stimulus, you find some stuff to make you think what I could do. Try it and see what works. And we've had some results in through the poll, so I'm going to share those now. And I can see we've got a real mix of people. So roughly half of you already have some practices to support your well-being, which is really great. A couple of you don't have any yet. Well, I hope this tool will help you to build those. And a few of you sort of have some. So I hope, you can clarify what you're going to try and see what works for you. It's all about experimenting and learning. Again, learning from those experiments that I've been doing and learning from the experiences that you've had.
I love the idea that people have actually been honest enough to say sort of.
Yeah.
I put that in there because I would say, whilst I've got lots of little, it's sort of, I wouldn't say I'm the most, best example of winning through COVID. I sort of got some practices and they're keeping me going. Some days and some weeks it's better than others, but at least I'm trying to move myself onwards. So it's all right to be sort of. In fact, when we did our survey, though, 74% of leaders said they actively had a practice in place to manage their well-being, which I was amazed by. But to those 14 who don't beat yourself up about that. Don't say, I've got to go and download the Couch to 5K app or Headspace app now. Actually, just think maybe what one little thing can I do in the Be Kind of Yourself section that is your version of a practice.
And we've had a really nice comment come in, a quote: "The only world we can control is our internal world. Once we sit with this and get comfortable with this and understand it, then we can start to work with Think Like a Monk." So I think that leads us neatly into the next.
Yes, thank you so much for that. It's as if someone understood exactly what we're going to do next. So this is all about actually letting go. So it's really good to let go, to just really be conscious that at the moment we're sort of we're not fully in control, but leaders often have experience of being in control, and this is unusual for this. We've managed our careers, we've managed our lives to be where we are, what we've succeeded in life, to have the jobs that we have, to have the career we have, the house that we have, the family that we have. But over the last 6 months, things are constantly changing, and there are things that are way beyond our control, and we might be feeling a bit buffeted by all of this level of uncertainty. In all honesty, we are being buffeted, and it's not going to change over the next 6 months. So how can you, as that comment said, take control of that, of our internal world? What can you control and what do you have to let go of? And a really, really good way to do this is to complete your circles of influence tool. And there's a large version of it on the next slide. And I'll just go through that in a little bit of detail. You'll see it in your interactive in your PDF. The first thing is, what is directly within your control? What absolutely do you have the power to make a decision about? And that might be around your sleep, your hydration, your exercise, your diet. It may be the room that you're attending your webinars in, whatever it might be. Whether you have a walk at the beginning or the ending of the day, what is it that you directly control? And I think by listing what you directly control, what you'll realize is you have more opportunities than you might have thought of when you're in crisis mode and when you're absolutely in the thick of COVID. By listing what you can control, it gives you energy. And I believe part of a bit of well-being is about having choices, and it allows you to identify what choices you have that you have direct control of in your life. And your second sphere is the sphere that you influence. This is about, maybe it's the people that you work with, maybe it's the family that you live with, maybe it's your partner, maybe it's the community that you have, maybe it's your church, but things that you have an influence over. Now, you may not be able to control injustice around things like Black Lives Matter, but you may be able to influence it by contacting your MP. What is it around the world and around the way you live your life that you identify you can have some level of influence over, even if you cannot control the final decision? And again, it starts to extend your consciousness of how much you're actually in control at the moment, how much you're able to do, as opposed to how much I'm stuck and how things have changed and how much I can't do at the moment as a result of COVID. But the third level of circle of influence is the circle of acceptance. And this is about letting go of all of those things that you cannot influence and you cannot control. It's about understanding some things are beyond your sphere, whether it's about local lockdowns, whether it's around decisions around redundancies, size of your team, your P&L, whether you're going to decorate your spare bedroom this year or not, whatever it is, what you have to let go of accept, know it's going to impact upon you, use the previous practices to help you cope with that sphere of acceptance. But know by focusing on that, it's not going to nurture you. It's just going to frustrate you, and it will take your energy on something ultimately that you cannot control or you cannot influence. So after today, a really, really good exercise to do is to really think about what's in my gift to control. What can I influence, whether it's about my life, my community, my team, or my family? And then what do I have to let go of? And my vicar talked recently in a sermon about acceptance. And that's been a real beautiful word for me, to think about those things in the third circle. I have to accept that for now, I have to let them go. I cannot do anything about them. I know they will impact me, and I have some practices in place to cope with the impact on them. So the last practice I want to talk to you today is my new favorite word, probably after acceptance. My new favorite word is onwards. And this is a word you may know Howard Schultz, who was the CEO of Starbucks. He used to sign off his emails with the word onward. And those of you who on this webinar who've worked with me and members of the team, you'll see that I've started to do the same. Steal with glee is our expression at the Innovation Beehive. He actually used that word onwards to be the title of his book about the turnaround story at Starbucks. But this idea of moving onward is a really good one to hold at the moment. So moving onward is about saying, what can I do, even at a very micro level, to feel that I'm moving forward within my life, whether it's in my career, whether it's in my personal life? What are the small things that I can do to make sure that I'm moving onward, whether it's something I can do today, this week, or this month? And on the next slide, you'll see that it's in the workbook there, a little activity for you to think about in terms of what you can do today, what you can do this week, and what you can do this month. And an example of that, this lesson of onward being a great one to help reconnect you into your energy source, knowing that there are some things that are going to hold you back, some things that are going to keep you stuck, but what small things can you do to move you onwards? It's about focusing in on those small things right now. Continually avoiding staying in that crisis mode where we're stuck and we don't feel able to operate, maybe because we're spending a lot of time in the third circle, what we can't control or influence. But making sure that every day, every week, and every month, there's one small thing that we do for ourselves to move us onwards. Now, an example of this for me has been, I normally have between 12 and 15 people for Christmas lunch. It's a fantastic time. You know, it's a 6-bedroom house. It comes alive at Christmas. We're spilling over each other, and it's a fantastic time. This year, it's probably me, my husband, and the dogs. To be honest, there'll be no one else. But rather than feeling disappointed, and rather than really focusing in on the sadness that we're not going to have a big family Christmas with relatives from Ireland and all sorts of things, I'm focusing what can I do to make sure my Christmas this day is the best Christmas it can possibly be. And so I've planted some hyacinth bulbs. They're in the garden, there's some in the kitchen, we're trialing out both, and they will be blooming just in time for Christmas Day. And for me, every time I see those flower pots, it says to me, there will be a future beyond this. I am making small steps to think about how can I make things better. And I'll have beauty on Christmas Day. It won't be the Christmas Day that I love and that I've always wanted, but I will be focusing on what beautiful things I can create in that day. So even that small act of just planting some hyacinth bulbs a couple of weeks ago, every time I see those pots on the top of the fridge in the kitchen, it makes me smile. It makes me feel positive. It makes me think about what can I do to create the best out of the situation I have. It's my moment of onwards in the day. So I'd like you just to think for a moment, and maybe we can get a couple of people talking in the chat around maybe there's one thing that they can do today or this week or this month to move them onward. And don't make it something huge. We're not talking about setting yourself a big, hairy, audacious goal here. We're just talking about a small thing that you can do that, even if it feels like a shuffle, is shuffling one step forward. So does anyone think about, in the spirit of Howard Schultz and constantly moving forward, whether there's something they can do to stay onward today, this week, or next month?
Whilst people are thinking, Mark, I'll throw you mine. So as I said earlier, I'm planning on trying to work compressed weeks so that I can go for a hike. So as soon as we finish this webinar, I'm going to go and make myself some lunch. And at the same time as I'm doing that, I'm going to look through my walking book and then translate the maps from the walking book into an app on my phone. So I'm fully prepared for the 2 walks that I'm going to do this week. So I'm sort of, moving myself forward. I'm looking forward to going for the hikes, and I'm doing something to actually make it more likely that I do them, whatever the weather.
Great, fantastic, lovely. And we've had a comment come in here that, someone's going to go online and buy themselves some flowers lace today and start it growing. That's fantastic, absolutely. Well, maybe in December we can share pictures of the flowers on our tables. It's just those little small things about saying there will be a time beyond this, but consciously having a habit that then takes that mentality, that forward-thinking view, and anchors it in the today. So I hope. Oh, yes.
I'm saying as well that this isn't a to-do list, is it? This isn't like make my list of things I'm going to do today, things I'm going to do. There's other tools for that, urgent, important, matrix, whatever you want. This is about how you move yourself forward as a person and as a leader, isn't it, Mark? Rather than all the stuff.
Absolutely.
This is my to-do list. It's different from this tool.
Yes, because this is about that whole habit of health, leading in health, nurturing yourself, taking care of yourself, and not getting stuck. The thing is, with so much uncertainty, and we don't know which way to move at the moment, and we know that if we make a decision, it's probably going to have to change in the light of new data, new information, new regulations, or God forbid 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon when Rishi Sunak comes on the TV and gives us some new news. If anyone here is in HR, it doesn't always start off the weekend as smoothly as possible. It's just about saying, is there one small thing that physically manifests this idea of moving onwards, something that I can see or I can do that says to me and signals to me there will be a time beyond this, and I am actively creating that time. So I hope today has been useful for you to understand a little bit around some of the practices that you might be able to put in place, those micro habits, not beating yourself up about not doing a 6:30 a.m. keep fit with your personal trainer, about just small things you can do to reconnect yourself into why I actually got into this game in the first place. What was the purpose that inspired me? And what do I need to reconnect in that energy, that emotion that will help fuel me? It's about recognizing what you have achieved as opposed to how much you have to do. What can you celebrate over the last few months, those small achievements that you've made, even if, as Joe shared in his example, that the final goal wasn't actually achieved? How can you take care of yourself, being honest and open about your emotions, and actively giving yourself the challenge in those dark days to try and look for the joy? I sometimes just say to myself, this is really hard. I'm going to go outside and try and find some color and bring that color into my life because all of it seems a little bit dark at the moment. Understanding what you can control, what you can influence, and what you have to accept and let go of. And then finally, onward, making sure that you put little practices in place, little things, iconic actions like a bowl of flowers that you're growing for Christmas that say to you, there is a time beyond this, and I am proactively creating that for myself. So thank you so much for your attendance today and for some of the great insightful examples in the chat. Hopefully the workbook has been useful to you. We wish you all the very best. As you lead through the wall, go through it, go over it, go round it, and above all, move onward. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Mark. I found that very helpful. I hope everybody else did. I've just put some details in the chat box. So I put my email address, my phone number, and also the link to download the workbook from our website as well. So please do feel free to share that with your teams. And if you and your teams are continuing to struggle with building resilience, feel free to get in touch with me and we can talk about running a short 2-hour workshop with you and your teams to actually work through this workbook in more detail. And hopefully that will help as well. But it's been a pleasure spending the day with you, spending the last hour with you. Thank you all for joining us, and see you in the future on future webinars. Take care, everyone.